The world is becoming more unglued by the day. Local consequences are now showing up. We are seeing sky-high gas prices, higher food prices, shortages, and more. How should you respond? Go to redpills.tv/patriot. That's redpills.tv/patriot. And secure your long-term emergency food storage from My Patriot Supply. My Patriot Supply is by far the largest preparedness company in America. They're in stock and shipping quickly in unmarked boxes to your door. Their emergency food supplies last up to 25 years in storage. When you need it, it'll be there. Lunches, dinners, drinks, and snacks totaling over 2,000 calories a day. Get free shipping on any order of over $99. Again, go to redpills.tv/patriot.
From the spaceship in the sky to the simulation in the mind. Let's all embark on another journey of Conversations on the Fringe.
All right. What is up, everybody? My name is Josh, and that is JimBob over there. This is the Repill Project's Conversations on the Fringe. This is where we take conversations outside the ordinary to the extraordinary, and we talk about the things that are normally not talked about. Welcome, man. What's up, JimBob? How are we doing tonight?
Just fine. How about yourself? How are we doing out there?
I'm doing well, man. So, tonight we're talking about the Adam and Eve story, and I think everybody's expecting us to get into the Bible and start talking about Adam and Eve, when in actuality, unless they had been on TikTok the last few weeks and heard these popular TikToks going around, they wouldn't know what we were talking about, would they?
No, not at all, because actually the Adam and Eve story is going to be a story about cataclysms.
That's right. This is a book that was written in, I believe this was the 1960s, a book that was written in the 1960s, and we're on the wrong one. There it is. It's a book that was written in the 1960s called The Adam and Eve Story by a guy by the name of Chan Thomas. This was classified and taken off the book publishing list, which means that this was a book that was censored in the 1960s by the United States government, okay?
It was actually illegal to own.
It was illegal to own, and in 2013, it was finally declassified. Now, this
highly redacted, though.
Highly redacted. Like over 200 pages are missing from the unclassified version, which brings you to wonder, what is in this book that is so important?
Absolutely.
Okay, so he's talking about here, this is the table of contents. The next cataclysm, the great floods, the story, the event, Genesis, conclusion. And he says the next cataclysm, like Noah's 6,500 years ago, like Adam and Eve's 11,500 years ago, this too will come to pass. So this is a really interesting story. I kind of went through a lot of it this week. I watched a few YouTubes on it, and then I got into a lot of Graham Hancock. I got into a lot of the Lower Dryas period. I got into a lot of cataclysms. I revisited theories that we had, some in my notebooks about a lot of this stuff. Give us a breakdown of this book and what your perspective is on it, Jim.
Well, I mean, it's definitely, about different kinds of cataclysms and such, and the way they break things down and explain how it has to do with, like, this guy talking about the core of the earth and plate shifting and stuff. And I'm not quite sure where that science was that time, but at least publicly, it wasn't something that was as devolved as this guy's book was about it and whatnot. And, like, the way he talks about basically the Great Flood and everything else that happens, it even leads into, like, stuff like the mud floods when you're talking about, like, Tartarian type conspiracy type stuff. And, like, there's a lot in there. This is definitely the opposite of the Adam and Eve story most people would be thinking they're tuning into right now.
Yeah, going through this, I was expecting something about Adam and Eve. I've heard of the apocalypse of Adam, which is basically another derivation of the story of Adam and Eve, and really where this one is told from the serpent side, that the serpent's the good guy and God is the bad guy. If you guys haven't checked that one out, it's called The Apocalypse of Adam. So I thought this was something like this. Now, if we take in the relevance during this time frame, this information that we're talking about right now, Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, cataclysms, the Lower Dryas, 10,500 years ago, Göbekli Tepe, all these things, the Great Pyramid, the Sphinx being dated back to 10,000, 11,000 years ago, even knowledge of a mass cataclysm and an ice age occurring during that time was unknown. This was not known to modern-day archaeology, to modern-day science. It wasn't until the 80s and the 90s that these things became known. So this gentleman, and I heard someone talking about him today, they said there's very little information about this guy who wrote this book, but apparently he worked for one of these intelligence agencies.
Okay.
And that's why this information was classified, because of who he was.
Okay. All right.
And so,
but I mean, you're taking out 200 pages, like, and I mean, and even the stuff that we can see and can read, and if you can find the file, of course, because it's not, it's not just an easy hop, skipping away, but like, I don't know, it's just like, it's so profound. Like, how did this guy even have a clue that this kind of stuff was going on? When, like you said, it wasn't until 20 years later that you were even figuring that out?
Yeah, exactly. And what this talks about is, it talks about, if you guys have ever seen, what is it, The Day After Tomorrow?
Yeah.
Right? This was written based upon a book by Whitley Strieber and Art Bell known as The Global Superstorm. The Day After Tomorrow, where you had the earth shaken and the pole shift, right? We are over, I think, 270,000 years overdue for a pole shift.
Yeah, that's the estimate I've heard before too. Yeah,
right. There's not much information what happens when an actual pole shift happens. We had a discussion about this in Fringe After Dark a few weeks ago, but in the sense of a pole shift, does it imbalance the Earth? Some interesting statistics.
Do the ice caps change?
Right. Do the ice caps change? Does anything change?
We go into a cycle,
Yeah. The earthquake that caused the Fukushima meltdown. This moved the continent, or the island of Japan, by over 8 inches. It also shortened the day by 0.25 microseconds, and also decreased the tilt of the Earth by, I think it was about 10, 11 inches. Okay.
And haven't they also adjusted the Earth's stance, I guess, with rocket launches and such out of Florida? That's why they had to start moving them around and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, not only that is the shifting of the magnetic pole that's been ongoing. They've been measuring it since the 1990s. Since the 1990s, the Northern Magnetic Pole has moved 600 miles and moves approximately 30 miles a year. And every time that it moves every year, they have to recalibrate their geopositioning satellites as well as airline runways have to be redone.
Wow.
And what you're just saying. And so this is not something minor. This is something very significant that they obviously didn't know. And so a lot of what this guy is potentially talking about is a pole shift or a major cataclysm. Now, throughout history, if you remember the whole theory of Pangea, and they say that continental, earthquakes and continental drift over millions upon millions of years is what caused the continents to be in this place that they're in now. But see, the thing is there's no evidence of that. There's no evidence to substantiate or even support that it was short, small movements of these continents over time. The continental drift theory wasn't even proposed. It was proposed as fringe all the way up until 1983 when it was finally widely accepted when is this Valdez or Andreas, the gentleman who discovered that the Earth was hit by a massive meteoroid during the age of the dinosaurs 120 million years ago. And this was proven that was the Gulf of Mexico area. And this actually proved continental drift theory, which they believe started around that time. And that's kind of how the continents got in the place they are. But there's no evidence to substantiate that the continents have drifted over short periods of time. There's actually more evidence to show that they've moved very, very fast in small amounts of time, very similar to what happened to Japan when it moved 8 feet. 8 feet, not 8 inches, sorry, 8 feet. 8 feet. I mean, like, unbelievable. Which means that
that's crazy.
The Earth can have an earthquake so massive that the continents begin to shift.
So with that, how many land masses are underground or underwater even that we don't even know about, and even underground? Like, they say the Sahara at one time was a lush rainforest, and now it's a desert. And so underneath all that sand, could there be traces of more rainforest? Would probably never know unless there was such a shift that caused the. And this is what brings me to the pole thing. When you were talking about, I was asking about the the ice caps shifting. Because if the pole keeps moving, are the ice caps going to move with it? Like, is that going to be where it finally stops moving for so many thousand years? Is that going to be the new North Pole? Is it going to be just as cold there as it is now?
Yeah. You know what's interesting, JimBob? I don't have the answers when it comes to the pole shift and what potentially will happen. I'm theorizing when we come to that. But now on the browser, I'm showing pictures of Bimini. Now, do you know where the first nuclear tests were done? Some of the first nuclear tests were done within the United States?
Within the United States?
Or for the United States of America?
Out near, the Bermuda Triangle area, right?
It's called Bimini Island. And so let me ask you this. And this says fake archaeology, and that's absolute BS. But have you ever heard of Bimini Road?
I have not.
So Bimini Road is a remnant of an ancient civilization that exists right off the coast of the island of Bimini. And you can find it, and a lot of people will say, oh, no, this is just the way the waves hit and shape the stones. But then there's actual structures out there. There's Egyptian-looking structures out there. There's pyramids out there. Now, let me ask you this. Firstly, who built them? Okay?
Sure.
And secondly, why is that the one island, to begin with, that the United States begins to bomb with the first nuclear test?
That makes a great question.
Have you ever heard the theory? Have you ever heard the theory of Tartaria, where all of old Europe was actually Tartarian buildings, and that their governmental buildings were actually existent with old Tartarian power stations? and that the whole purpose of World War I and World War II was to destroy all the Tartarian architecture and remove it so they could rewrite history.
And going on even prior to that, because they were trying to do it quite possibly even in the United States, because some of them old Tartarian maps show bits and pieces of Tartaria also overflowing into what's now America.
Yep, exactly.
Like the Civil War could have been used to destroy who knows what.
Oh, and I stand corrected. It was Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands, which was in the South Pacific. It wasn't Bimini Island, so I apologize for that. Yeah, that would have been really bad to do it in the Bahamas, but it was Bikini Atoll. Yes, that's correct. Thank you, Ye. But, this is just interesting that, we have these remnants of these ancient civilizations that are underwater.
Yes, absolutely, all over. Like I'm always reading about different places they're finding like different structures and even like little pyramids and stuff off coasts and down in like the Indian Ocean and stuff, and areas between like Asia and Australia. They say that there's like landmass pieces underneath the ground there.
Yeah. You got to think about it, because if you look at Bimini Road and where that's at, and then you have the Bermuda Triangle, a few hundred miles away from that, what if that was Atlantis? I mean, it's the Atlantic Ocean. And that's where Atlantis was, and the northern Turtle Island rose up out of it. What if the transition of continents is a normal thing that happens on this planet due to the fluctuative nature of the solar system in reference to the galaxy? We've actually shown this on this show before in talking about the sun cycles around the galaxy, whereas every about 8,000 years there's massive cataclysms, and that a lot of what the grand calendar, the big calendar, the Mayans and these timekeepers, these shamans were actually talking about in the sense of the zodiacal, the precession of the equinoxes, were these cataclysmic cycles. When you get into the Indian mythology, the Veda mythology, and you start talking about the Yugas and the Kali Yuga, and when you get into the Kali Yuga, and it's darkness and destruction, a lot of what they were potentially talking about was this position in the universe or in the galaxy as we're transiting it that becomes incredibly volatile.
So you're saying possibly like something else coming out of nowhere and interfering in the gravitational pull of things, like maybe Planet X, Neribu, however they want to call it or whatever, the Anunnaki coming back around every 8,000 years or so?
It very well could be. I mean, what if it was? Dude, think about this. What if this was true, but Planet X wasn't a planet? Let's just say it's a massive meteorite. Okay.
All right.
But what happens is it comes in very, very close proximity to Earth's orbit, which produces massive plasmic channels across the surface of the Earth, allowing massive earthquakes and upheaval to happen on Earth, which shifts out the continental lines. Now, if you're coming here to mine gold, when's the best time to do that? Right when new continents have risen and old continents have sunk.
You're moving around, because you're going to pull all that up to the Earth.
Yeah.
Surface anyway, yeah. Because you're going to shift everything around, and like because I see what you're talking about there, and that's going to be like an extra gravitational pull added up into all of that, and like you could sink whole continents and raise continents.
Yeah.
In places, because there's whole places on the map that are just ocean, like the Pacific Ocean, like that's a lot of dead space.
That's right. Well, yeah. I mean, if you go just to the west of South America, there's nothing but ocean, and I've actually traveled it.
That's awesome.
But you got to ask yourself: what if the geodynamics of this planet were so much different than we could ever imagine?
Sure.
What if there was some type of comet that came in to the that came into the proximity of Earth and caused massive upheavals, caused all the plasmic channeling that we've seen. This is the scarring of the Earth, right? This is the plasma universe theory, the electric universe theory. This is why we had that symbology 50,000, 10,000 years ago all over the place. And this, whatever it is, comes very, very close proximity. And when it does, it produces massive earthquakes and produces tectonic shifting and continental shifting that happen massively, basically bringing to the surface massive rare earth minerals, rare earth metals, including gold. And this is when a particular alien race just comes out and starts mining the planet, because that's when it's best to do it, because it's the planetary cycle.
And because it probably daggum near extincts anything that's living out there. Like, there's sure maybe some things actually survived, thus how humans started again. And that's why we found traces of humans that don't make sense in places of time that don't make sense. Like, because I mean, that's like we were talking a few weeks ago, the carbon dating thing has proven to be all out of whack. So who knows what time frame things really are.
Well, you know that there's substantial evidence to support that human beings lived in North America about 120,000 years ago?
Yes, absolutely.
And
when you think about that, that's practically, walking around with things that you wouldn't imagine walking around with.
Well, and that's also walking around on a sheet of ice, according to modern theory.
Yes, absolutely.
Which doesn't make much sense, as if the Earth wasn't a sheet of ice back then. Instead, I think that our carbon dating is probably all wrong. And I think that they have to keep it wrong, because if they showed the correctness, it would show the cataclysmic cycle.
Stone forms faster than they believe it does, as far as like something turning to stone, like that. I think it forms way faster than the thousands of years that they try to claim it.
Well, that's the De Beers conspiracy, right?
Yes.
The De Beers family has a monopoly on the diamond mines around the world. They found so many diamonds that they began to destroy them. And what the theory goes is that diamonds don't take millions of years and massive pressure in the middle of the earth to actually create. They're actually very, very abundant when you get down in there, and that they formulate much faster than you can ever imagine. And this theory would actually substantiate that short time frames and massive shifts within global tectonics and continental shifts would produce massive pressure within those areas, turning organic and even carbon materials into diamonds almost overnight.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and if you're finding that many of them on the surface, just how far are you going to continue to find them digging in that same area and such? And, that's why they decided to make a killing off of it and convince the whole world that they needed to spend, what is it? Twice your salary or something on a ring.
Yeah, $4,000 for a carat. I remember back in the 1990s, my father, excuse me, my father was like me, very much interested in conspiracy theories. And so he used to go out and get all the books, and he would go out and get all the videos on different conspiracies. Well, there was this one video series that he got, and there was a guy on there who was a legitimate oil tycoon. He was one of the big Texas oil tycoons. And he had met with the big guys, BP and Standard Oil and all of them, at an annual meeting. Oh, wow. And this is like 1981 or 1982. And they were talking in this annual meeting about the coming forth of all these new alternative energy technologies and how to suppress them, and what would happen if the world really did find out that oil was a renewable resource that renewed every few years within those wells.
Yeah, I've there's been stuff that even Rothschild had made mention of stuff like that in documents that can't be found anymore too. Like that's a big conspiracy I've read a lot about, because like you're talking about, they look at the prices of it at the moment. Yeah. I don't know how bad they are where you are, but about $5 here. So, and that's pretty rough for me down here. And like, But now they're telling us that it's reproducing. And I mean, honestly, it makes sense. Look at how much stuff is plastic, right? Like, I mean, there's so much plastic everywhere. Like, and as much as there is, how is you and the threat that we've been going to be running out of oil since what, the 60s?
Yeah, we've been running out of oil since the beginning of time, according to these
Right.
people.
That's what I'm saying. So like, and yet here we are, still have it. In fact, it looks like we're about to fight about it. So
Yeah, Rob, send me that information. That'd be great. I'd love to check them out. But yeah, I mean, listen, there's something more going on here than meets the eye. I mean, I've talked about this regularly, but if you look at the population on planet Earth at the turn of the 20th century, it's approximately 1 billion people. Now add up the amount of people that died on this planet in the first 50 years of the 20th century.
okay.
This is from Mao Zedong. This is from the communist and socialist revolutions, World War I, World War II, the Spanish flu. It's approximately about 500 to 600 million people.
That's a lot.
Okay, so let me ask you this. If the population at the turn of the 20th century in the world globally was 1 billion, for 50 years, over a 500,000 people or 500 million people died. Okay?
All right.
What is the permutation that you would need to use to get to the current population of 8 billion?
Right. Like, yeah, no. I think there's something fudging with numbers or something there as far as like modern population.
So to give it to a perspective, is that every person that survived, every person, man and woman that survived, every woman would have to have had 8 children, which all those children survived, and those children had 8 children, where all of those children survived, in order for the population to be 8 billion today.
I mean, I know we had a lot of big families going on at some point in time, but like that's a stretch.
It is a stretch. It's actually impossible, highly improbable. So it's either this, Jimbo. Either the world's population is not 8 billion, okay, or there was a mass genocide that took place on this planet, and the world's population isn't 8 billion. Or something happened and they injected people into this population, maybe robots, maybe AI, maybe a simulation. I don't know.
I mean, now come on, they've been talking about cloning since the 30s.
Oh, I know, but there's something more going on here because, we start looking at this book, the Adam and Eve story on here. This guy back in the 1960s is talking about information that wasn't prevalent until the 1980s and 1990s.
The orphans. We were talking about the orphans a few weeks ago and how there was so many orphans and orphanages and such.
Little Orphan Annie, Daddy Warbucks. Do you know who Daddy Warbucks was modeled after?
Like, I mean, I know it's crazy. I do not actually, but I know it's crazy and crazy to think about. But like, children could survive. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're good at hiding, and they're that fitting in small places. And if something nuts was going on and a bunch of kids survived and come out, like that would go back into working on figuring out why there was all these orphanages.
One of my biggest theories is that there's a group of secret societies that know this cycle. They understand what happens on the planet, the planetary cycles. And this last one that happened was probably about, a few thousand years ago. And they used it to their advantage to hijack power. And what they did is when they came out of it, most likely the highly technologically advanced society. So you have to take into account some statistical analysis. Do you remember that one show that was on the History Channel, like Earth After 500 Years or whatever it was?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so if there was a major oceanic cataclysm where the seaboards of the majority of the continents on the planet were hit with a tidal wave only 50 feet high, 85% of the world's population would vanish overnight. Okay? You'd have massive sea life, happy as shit because they're getting to eat, right? But 85% of the world's population. So if you only had 15% of the world's population left on this planet, society would crumble in a matter of 10 years. And the reason being is because you don't have the talent, the engineering acuity, you don't have the engineers, you don't have the medical doctors, you don't have the people to run the machinery, you don't have the people to keep the reactors going, the coal plants, you don't have the distribution channels, you don't have the trucks that take the supplies, you don't have the people mining. You've lost all of that knowledge and information. And so what would happen is society would go backwards from there. But they would try to preserve as much technology and much knowledge as possible within that short time frame while they still remembered. And so the idea here is a few thousand years ago, a cataclysm happened, much like we're talking about right now. And that this group of people knew this and they had a plan in place to preserve knowledge and information. And this knowledge and information went into secret societies. And it was probably just, society probably lived on, and let's just say it was a Tartarian civilization. Let's say it was the Atlanteans or whatever. It probably moved on for a few hundred years in small little cities across the globe that were the centers of commerce and population that still had their technology rolling, and everybody else lived on the outskirts and very, very primitive lifestyles, hunting and gathering. Because, hey, we just had this massive cataclysm. I'm done with the technology thing. You guys probably caused it from global warming, whatever or whatnot, right? But this is just how people are. We're going to have that dichotomy in society. So let's say that this situation's happening, and then eventually that technology, since you only have 15% of the population left, they can't reproduce fast enough.
Yeah.
And eventually the society begins to decline. And the technology begins to go in the hands of those people within the power figures, the politicians, the leaders, the rulers, the corporatists, these types of people, and they start hiding it and occulting it from the regular people. And they start just venturing out and leaving the city till eventually these people are the kings and the queens, the monarchs, the royal bloodlines that hold this knowledge. They have the secret societies. They have this old ancient knowledge of the ancient world of how it works. They know the cycles, right? And they're keeping it from the rest of the people, and the rest of the people lay ignorant because a few hundred years later, their bloodlines still know this information. They've still kept it. They have the books, right? But everybody else is in the dark and they have no freaking clue, and they're trying to figure this all out.
Right, yeah.
And now, you fast forward to now.
Yeah, and then and since they have that, they have that knowledge and stuff, like they've done this time around, they turned everybody else into walking tax cattle, basically.
Yeah.
And they're living up in the high life, planning for it to happen again, building underground cities and underground tunnelways and stocking up God knows what underneath, the mountains and such. We've talked about, not with you guys, but I've talked about the tunnels and stuff all over the country. And heck, they even go out into the oceans and other places and whatnot. So, they're building stuff out there. Tesla's building an underground highway as we speak.
Yeah. And so, we can get into the tunnels and a little knowledge that I have on that. That's an interesting story right there. But, this book, the Adam and Eve story, he talks about that it's not a galactic cycle or a solar cycle, but instead a cycle that takes place inside the core of the Earth. And that the core of the Earth itself has a reflexive cycle every 6,000 or 3,000 years, to where basically it shifts. And we talked about this a little bit last week on Fringe After Dark, but it shifts. And this is when a pole shift happens, but also you have tectonic instability where the continents rise and fall and new continents rise up out of the ocean and the old continents fall down into the ocean.
Mm-hmm. Which was, I actually made a video about this on my TikTok. And as I was speaking to you before we started, it's just vanished. It was about a year ago I made it. I honestly don't know where it went from, but there was page 6 was a verse. If you don't mind, I'll read it again here. Because even the book kicks off. He read the opening statement of the book about, the Lake Noah thing. And it keeps going like that for what it has. And it talks about how fire and it was covered by unbelievable amounts of mud in San Francisco and Los Angeles. Not a trace is left. Egypt emerges from the Mediterranean, and at newer and higher, and still land, still the land of the ages, the common monopolist become the mysterious Baalbek of the new era. Like that right there is just talking about. I mean, to me, like I thought how it was talking about. Okay, so you're wiping out a whole area. It's going to be covered in new landmass, not even going to be there anymore, and like Egypt might come back up out of the sand and be something hot, be back what it was, like because the texts say that it was once a very flourishing, luscious place to be, and now it's desert. Like
so it says a new era. Yes, the cataclysm has done its work well. The greatest population regulator of all does once more for man what he refuses to do for himself, and drives a pitiful few who survive into a new stone age. This guy's a eugenicist. Listen to that. Once more, the Earth has shifted its 60-mile thick shell, with the poles moving almost at the equator in a fraction of a day. Whoa. With the poles moving almost to the equator in a fraction of the day. Again, the atmosphere and the oceans refusing to change direction with the Earth's shell have wiped out almost all life. After this tumble, we join Noah, Adam and Eve, Atlantis, Mu, and Olympus, and Jesus joins Osiris, Taurara, Zeus, and Vishnu. And so he goes on, talks about the great floods. Noah, Adam and Eve, Vishnu, Osiris, what do they have in common? They represent eras, ages apart, and yet somehow they all join hands in the next cataclysm and walk with us. There are others who walk with us too, men of science, long forgotten, those who first saw that these tumbles, the cataclysmic catastrophes or revolutions of the earth shell have happened before, countless times. André Luc, 1779, Georges Cuvier in 1812 were the foremost. Dolomieu, the famous mineralogist, joined with the consensus, as did Escher and Forel, the Swiss geologists. Also, André de Luc Jr. and von Buch, who all agreed that the cataclysms were caused by sudden revolutions of the surface of the Earth. Cuvier, in his Theory of the Earth, first published in 1812, based his conclusions on his unparalleled correlative research in stratigraphy, comparative anatomy, and paleontology. At the time he wrote, every part of the Earth, every hemisphere, every continent exhibits the same phenomena. There has, therefore, been a succession of variations in the economy of organic nature. The various catastrophes which have disturbed the strata have given rise to numerous shiftings of this continental basin. It is much importance to mark that these repeated eruptions and retreats of the sea have neither been slow nor gradual. On the contrary, most of the catastrophes which occasioned them have been sudden, and this is especially easy to be proved with regard to the last of these catastrophes. I agree, therefore, with M.M. de Luc Dolomieu in thinking that if anything in geology is established, it is that the surface of our globe has undergone a great and sudden revolution, the date of which cannot be much earlier than 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. Also, one preceding revolution at least had put the continents underwater, perhaps 2 or 3 eruptions of the sea. Whoa.
Right.
Now,
like, I mean, that there's so much there, just so much. Especially going back to, to him talking about other people that helped him come to this, or basically had the same conclusion he's coming to years before, but not even people correlating it like that or whatever.
Yeah.
Up to the point until what you said, the 80s, when they started figuring this out. It was all just fringe theory then.
Well, and if you look at the time frames as well, if you look at the dating of Göbekli Tepe, if you look at the, you know what's interesting about Göbekli Tepe is they date it about 12,500 years ago, which would have been coming out of the Lower Dryas time period, right?
Yes.
Now, the interesting thing about Göbekli Tepe is that it wasn't buried naturally. Is that the people buried Göbekli Tepe as if they were hiding it from somebody.
Or something.
Maybe preserving it after the cataclysm.
Right. Or, that way they had that there for them,
Yeah, their city was preserved.
Yeah, already underground. So no matter what they, what went on, they would still be there.
Wow, that's a great theory too. And then think about this: is you have during this time you have the epics of Gilgamesh that are translated from Sumerian tablet, the Sumerian king gods, right? This is Arahisra, I think his name is. This is the Noah of the Mesopotamian Sumerian world. And then you have Noah and the biblical floods, which were about 6,000 years ago. So you have 6,000 years before that, Epics Gilgamesh. This is when Göbekli Tepe, the Sphinx. We know the Sphinx was during this time frame because the precessional cycle was in Leo, and this is where the Sphinx is directly lined up to. Is the lion, the Leo, the Sphinx was actually directly lined up with the rising of the sun on the constellation of Leo in about 10,500 to 11,500 BC. Now, if you fast forward 6,000 years. This is the age of Noah. This is the age of when the Hebrews came about and the first writings and the Fertile Crescent and all civilization came back too. It's almost like civilization was paused for 6,000 years in between.
And this is where we start figuring out that timeline is not right. Like there's things just missing in just a whole area of time that just doesn't seem right from when they started adjusting calendars and such like that.
What if it wasn't 6,000 years in between? What if our dating system is completely wrong? What if dinosaurs were just here 5,000 years ago? What if this last cataclysm was just a few hundred years ago?
I personally think that there's untouched areas of Earth that there's probably actually still some kind of dinosaurs moving about. Like there's so much of South America that's untouched, and even so much of Asia that's untouched. Like who knows what's walking around out there? So but I mean, this when you were talking about the things being underground, like this would also talk about making a lot of sense for like Native Americans and other cultures that talk about their ancestors coming from underground and all the underground cities they find worldwide. Like how many times have people prepared and or had this set up for this to happen? Like do they always lie to their people about it, or maybe was there a time like Tartaria where everybody kind of knew about it and
maybe that's what Tartaria actually was.
That's what I'm saying, like harnessing the earth and everything that it does, like the free energy and everything like that, and they were all in tune to the earth and knew that this was going to happen, and were living their life in tune to the best that they could with the things that were happening to maybe hope prevent it, and then boom, it didn't happen. Like somebody else got control.
So think about this: is what if during the last cataclysm we prepared for it, our civilization came out massively together still, okay? And that was Tartaria. And we built this giant civilization. And the Tartarian civilization was the one that actually survived it, preserved it, and they ruled over the earth during this time. And that's why you have the Great Wall of China, the Great Wall of India. These have outposts that point outward or into China, not outward of China. And so you had the Mongolian people, which were really probably Tartarians, which were really portrayed as white people, not Asian descent people. We've seen this in historical account. So if you think about it, what if this Tartarian civilization was one that just survived the last cataclysm and just lay kind of dormant from the rest of society and was like, F you guys, we don't want nothing to do with you, until eventually these cults overthrew them, took their technology, destroyed their entire civilization with 2 world wars and a plague.
Drug them into it unwillingly without them even knowing, just so they could destroy it, rewrite the history, and be in control.
Yeah, rewrite the history, and then prepare the world to go into another one. Prior to that, they control all the information, they control all the technology, they control all the knowledge. This is why you got the seed banks. This is why you got the data banks. This is why they have all this information. This is why they're creating the AIs, because the AI will actually survive during this time.
Sure. And I mean, and really now it's about the choice. Do we want to move forward into their, who knows, technoarchy, or I'm bad at saying words sometimes, but the or do we want to try to go back to something like maybe what Tartaria had going on with free energy for everybody and more folks living in harmony than whatever this chaos is nowadays. It always seems like I hate to be this guy, but it always seems like the EU. It seems like Europe just seems to be dragging the whole world into some crazy stuff all throughout history.
Well, it's that British Empire. It's the most ruthless empire that's ever lived. But, think about this, is if they develop this grid AI system through satellite-based technology, and that cataclysm does happen, all they have to do is have a connection to that satellite, and they can re-download all the information, re-download all the systems, begin manufacturing and production all over again.
Like, now what about I've seen some stuff where they've theorized that this kind of information could be and can be stored in crystals. So, like
Marcel Vogel. You know who Marcel Vogel was? IBM Nobel Prize winner?
Correct. I knew that, and well, that's kind of what I was talking about with it, where like, you could store all this stuff in these crystals. So like, how many of these crystals out here that, especially like some of these folks that love to collect rocks, have information maybe hidden inside of them already that we don't even know about?
Think about that. What if like you came upon like this, oh man, like a crystalline forest, and it was actually a computer from an ancient society?
Here's a very actual rare crystal, unlike a diamond, but moldavite. If you can actually get your hand on real moldavite, that's a very, that's supposed to be a very powerful crystal in its own self. But like, if there was a way to store information on that crystal, how would you be able to get it back off of there? And, what could it tell us actually with using that, theory about putting stuff on there and whatnot? Which, I mean, it's not really even a theory. Again, I know where I've seen him talking about actually putting information onto a crystal like that. That's pretty awesome stuff, actually.
Right. Huh. Interesting. It's a fascinating theory to even think about, isn't it?
Right. Like, I mean, you wouldn't think just holding a rock that you could fill it with information, but because of light spectrums and such like that, you could etch who knows what inside there.
Yeah, absolutely, you could. So
because, I mean, storage space is getting smaller and smaller as we move on.
Yeah. So the Adam and Eve story, tell me a little bit more about it, because I know you've gone through this whole document.
Oh man. So I mean, it gets into like the Earth's core stuff. Like, we're talking about the crust and whatnot, but it starts talking about, like shifts inside the core, as far as, like different heating and cooling, and causing, a lot of this outside shifting to go on, and like the elements shifting around. And then of course it devolves in different aspects of like the cataclysms and whatnot, as far as like, like where with what you can read, because again, there is parts where you start reading and then it just dies, and you got to come up to another area of the book.
Right.
Like, I apologize.
No, you're fine.
I've actually got it pulled up in front of me because I've been going back over it this evening while we've been hanging out. It talks about like the overwhelming evidence that gives like where the North Pole moves.
Okay.
And as far as like the start of the Arctic Ocean, the Sudan Basin, the Hudson Bay, the Capson Sea in Wisconsin, and how over, all these years they moved up to 10,000 feet. Like that's a lot for back to talking to the landmasses movement and such. And they're saying that this originates from the cores fluctuating and whatnot inside there.
the core theory is really interesting to me. I mean, I've always looked at it as that was something that would probably occur with, some type of relationship with the sun. The sun cycles. You have super cycles of the sun, 11-year solar maximum, solar minimum cycles. You have 144-year super cycles. You have galactic cycles of how they interact with it. I'm betting you that somehow this is related to something more. Go ahead.
But again, though, a lot of that's really, I mean, some of it's proven, but a lot of it's really theory because we've never been able to dig that far. Like they've, the deepest hole isn't even close enough to be what they would consider the core.
Well, what is the deepest hole that we've ever drilled?
There's that one. I believe it is in like the Russian type area. But they went deeper down than Everest is tall, and
they went 8 miles.
Yeah, and that's where they started. What is it? They started hearing screams and like different kinds of stuff coming from underneath the hole, like because that's conspiracy part of it, I guess. But they were talking about because it's been called the Devil's Hole or Hell's Hole or something like that.
I think that's something different. So the Devil's Hole is a natural fissure that I think opened up that goes down massive amounts of ways. And it's been spewing lava out of it for a long time. The one hole that they drilled was approximately 8 miles down, I believe, in northern Siberia.
That's where it was, yes.
And they could not go down any further. Now, to give everybody a little relevance, the crust of the Earth, this is not including the mantle or anything like that, is 60 miles. It's very thick. And so this barely penetrated the upper layer of the Earth. So to get down in there. Now, what's interesting, and this is what I find really interesting, and no rock scientist, geologist, or anybody that'll talk about that, does water erode rocks?
I mean, that's what they tell you.
Well, it makes sense, right? Water erodes rocks.
Sure. Like, I mean, that's they say that's how the Grand Canyon came about. Just the stream running through the rocks right there all that time.
Plasma streams, high energy plasma streams. But let's think about this for a minute. If we drip water onto a rock, the water will begin to chip away at the rock. We know this.
Eventually, yes.
So this means that water erodes rock over time, especially moving water. Now, one of the most corrosive waters is salt water. What is the continental foundation of North America made of?
Rock.
Bedrock, right?
Yeah.
Is the ocean continuously jumping into that and hitting it over and over and over and over again?
I mean, all the time.
So you got to wonder, why doesn't it erode the foundation of the continents?
That's a great question.
So I worked with I can't really say too much about this, but I worked with a contractor in the military. He wasn't on any special projects or anything like that. He just happened to be there at the time that I was there, and we started talking, and he was a programmer, designer, and developer, and he was telling me how he developed the submarine entry program, this whole program for transportation for certain bases. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. And he goes, yeah, I'm heading to Nevada. And I'm like, Nevada? You said you work at sub bases. He goes, yeah, we have a sub base in Nevada. And I go, how do we have a sub base in Nevada? I said, how do submarines get to Nevada? He goes, you got to think past the limitations. And I go, well, what do you mean? And for the next 30 minutes, I just sat there and listened. Well, he told me that back in the 1950s, they discovered that underneath the continent of North America and underneath every continent after that is that water had eroded. And basically the foundation of these continents are porous. And they're very, very porous because they're saturated with salt water. And what happens is that the salt erodes and produces caverns underneath the continents, tunnels underneath the continents. And that you can drive a submarine into the Great Lakes from the Pacific Ocean underneath the continental shelf. And this is how they were getting submarines into Nevada, is they were taking them in underneath California into this porous structure, into these tunnels that were already created naturally, and they would pop up where lakes were. Well, why does it make sense that underneath lakes are massive salt beds?
Yeah.
Underneath freshwater lakes are massive salt beds.
Sure.
Where is the water coming from? The water's coming from the ocean, except it's being filtered out the salt underneath it. Why do we always find massive salt beds in old places there used to be lakes and rivers?
Oh, wow. Nice.
Because the water is actually coming up to the surface. The salt is being filtered out, being deposited in the soil as the water rises and forms a lake, a river, so on and so forth. And so the actual hollow earth theory is not necessarily a hollow earth. It's that the continental foundations are actually porous and cavernous.
And so there's areas that absolutely have water running through them, and there's areas that have who knows living there.
That's right.
I mean, there's always people, like Nevada is a big place where there's underground people living. Like, you know, there's a guy that's been working on a documentary out there about those people here recently that I've been kind of paying attention to. Like they live under the streets of Nevada, and there's even the people that live under the streets of New York. Like there's
people that live under the streets of Portland.
There's people that live on. I think there's people that live under the streets of places that we wouldn't even imagine. Like there's totally tunnels, and I like when they talk about like the Underground Railroad. I still believe that there's a lot of tunnel systems that we don't even know about that probably went on in those days that they were probably actually using.
They're still in use today. I mean, we actually I did an investigative video into the tunnel systems.
Yeah.
It was during the QAnon days, and we talked a lot about it. But there's old Dutch slave tunnels under New York City. There's old cattle tunnels. So during the 1920s, the farmers in Manhattan would take the cow down the main road to the slaughterhouse. Well, the population started increasing. So what they did is they allowed them to utilize the old slave tunnels underneath the streets. And so they call them kill tunnels. And they go underneath Central Park. Eventually, these turned into old subway tunnels, and some of these subway tunnels are now abandoned. And there's an estimated over 20,000 people that live, homeless people that live in these tunnels under New York City.
I think that's what's up with all these areas that are like national parks or blocked off by your federal government and protected. Like, I think that there's things out there that can lead you into these underground areas and whatnot, and that's why they protect that area and won't let you walk around in things that your tax dollars pay to protect.
Well, you heard the story of Teddy Roosevelt, right?
Yes.
And the Rough Riders in the national parks. Tell it to us. Let me know what you think.
Oh my Lord!
If I can do it, if you don't want to, I can do it.
You can go right ahead and tell it to us. Your words probably smoother than mine.
All right. So during the early 1900s, there was massive people disappearing from the national forest. It became an epidemic to the point where Teddy Roosevelt, when he was president, produced the National Forest. The National Forest Foundation or whatever it is.
That set up all the national, the foundations and stuff for it.
Right, as well as the park rangers, because so many people were going missing within National Forest. He even did a trip out to the National Forest to hunt what they believed to be Sasquatch or Yeti. That was one of the primary causes of the disappearances of the people, and they had good evidence to believe that there was some type of big human ape living in the woods that was killing human beings and eating them.
Yeah, and this is
well documented. This is
well documented, like government stuff. Like this is legitimate type stuff, and like this is where a lot of people start. People try to say this is where like Sasquatch comes from, but like no, I mean this is like well documented stuff, and we had a president out there riding around looking for Sasquatch.
Exactly. Like, and then you got that show awesome. Missing 411.
Mm-hmm.
Have you checked that one out yet?
I don't think I've actually watched it. I've heard of it though.
So I was listening to a Coast to Coast AM the other day. It was a rerun, but they had the dude on there. I forgot his name. I think it might have been that dude Rob was talking about. But they had him on there, and he was talking about it. And he's like, this is legit. Like, I'm not a conspiracy theorist or anything like that. But he goes, on average, 70 people a year go missing in the Park Services and are never found.
Wow. Now, yeah, about to say never found is a better response, I think, because how many people go out there and find something that they enjoy and they don't want to come back? We always think the worst, really.
Yeah.
You know, as a group of people, we're always like, oh, they've gone missing. Well, what if they found something and what they found was worth staying for?
Well, a lot of the stories are people going missing, and then, like, for instance, there's this boy who's 18 months, just barely able to walk.
Yeah.
And he goes missing from his backyard. Okay, and they back right up to a national park. And they bring out the hounds, they bring out search teams, and can't find him. 3 days later, he's found 8 miles away from his house. He's 18 months. How did he get 8 miles away?
That's a span.
I mean, he obviously didn't walk it.
Yeah, for sure.
Let me see. I might as well go north today. You know,
right.
Stewie over there.
Yeah. No, there's no way he got there on his own.
Yeah. And so either somebody kidnapped him and then abandoned him. He was picked up by an animal. There's a lot of theories. I mean, that, you know, he could have been picked up by a bear.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
or an eagle.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen birds big enough down here in the South that are big enough to pick up dogs.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. He could have been picked up by an eagle. He could have been picked up by a bird or maybe an unknown animal. It doesn't matter. Or a human being. And that's how yeah.
Stumbled into a portal and popped up over there.
Yeah, or a portal. Now, I'm a firm believer that I think that we had a civilization. I think there's civilizations that have been on this planet that were highly technologically advanced. I think they knew about these cycles, and I think some of the civilizations have left. That they advanced so much that they're no longer here.
All right, and that can bring us right back around to this book, because when you start getting towards the end of the book, the way the pages are set up, they're just scattered, declassified pages. Some of them are handwritten, and there's a part in there that talks about secret cities of South America, lost cities of Africa, the lost continent of Mu, the lost Americans, and then what another place I found interesting is the very last page that's on there. It says, a little bit of knowledge can be a dangerous thing, or it can be a vibrant seed giving to the verdant forest and awakening the sleeping giants. And that's how it ends.
Designing the Worlds in Collision, Immanuel Velikovsky, which I know. How Old is the Earth? Patrick Hurley. He gives the author's names. A little bit of knowledge can be a dangerous thing, or it can be a vibrant seed giving rise a verdant forest and awakening sleeping giants. And that's how the book ends, but he gives you all these books to go and reference right here. The Lost Continent.
Right there, all the ones that he goes to give you to reference. I actually haven't read but a couple of those. Strange World, New Astronomy. And that's going to be it. I'm going to have to get on the ball there and try to find the rest of those.
Yeah. And by the way, guys, for anybody that doesn't know, the lost continent of Atlantis, when it's discussed, Solon visited, Socrates, and basically told him about Solon was a teacher, and he talked about it was 900 years or 9,000 years or 9 decades or whatever it was before his time. And this is where the story of Atlantis arises. I think that we're in a continuous cataclysmic shift on this planet, that this planet is, there's something wrong with this planet.
Yeah. I think it's alive. I mean, obviously it's alive, but like it goes through cycles depending on what we do to it and how we use it.
Yeah.
Like, obviously we're using it wrong, because I mean, shoot, man, weather itself has changed a whole lot, and we can't blame it on cows and me and you driving a truck back and forth. Like, there's definitely more things behind that.
Yeah.
You know, so like and with that, so like, does it lead to that every time because that's the choices we keep making because they're the easy choices, or or is it just literally a cycle that happens every time? Like were the Tartars onto being synchronized with the Earth so that it wouldn't violently reset the way that it's looking like it might again? Maybe not in our lifetime.
I haven't researched it enough to really know about this. I'm going to actually go look it up. The secret cities of South America. I'm going to check out the lost cities of
Yeah, I
Africa.
want to check that one out first. Actually, that was my list too. Yeah.
But, we have the World Economic Forum here talking about the Great Reset. We know that Great Resets have came before. The lineage of kings in ancient Egypt talks about old kingdoms, new kingdoms, the rise of each, the derivation of these kingdoms through floods. We talk about the rise of the Sumerian king list, which was a 40,000-year reign, 20,000-year reign of these various kings. And these could have just been time frames of the processional ages in between the various cataclysms.
Talking about like the Great Reset and setting things up. I've been actually researching Rand Remington.
Okay.
And like when you start getting into him and you see how much money and how many corporations he was a part of and owned and stuff like that, he seems to be like a behind the scenes, almost Bill Gates type funding.
Remington Rand?
What the Rand? John Rand Jr. or it turns out one of my admin on my page is the great niece of him.
What's his name?
Let me pull up my information real quick.
John Rand.
John Rand is Rand is the dude that started Rand, like that ended up
Rand
becoming
Corp,
Remington Rand. Yeah, Rand Corp.
John G. Rand. Is that
John G. Rand, but it was Junior, because Senior stepped down for a little while, because for a couple of years, and his son took over the business, and then when his father came back to the business, they split for a while, and like that's when he started getting big, and you start following his money trail, like he seems to be like a big influence of that time frame, like leading up to the Great Depression and even after it, with like just businesses and products and like things that he was doing. Kind of he seemed to be a big roller, you know what I mean, like somebody that is of big importance but is kind of looked over, that we don't really talk about.
A lot of these early conglomerates, massive billionaires, you gotta wonder how they were able to do what they did.
Right.
What knowledge did they have that put them in that place and position?
Right. Like what kind of teachings did they come across, or were they shown, or was passed down to them, through their bloodline? Because his grandfather started like a town or something in Massachusetts and stuff. Like it goes back. It's crazy how when you start getting on these lines of people, and when you follow them all the way back, they end up being like somebody super important to an area at one point in time that a town's named after or something. And then along the lines, it's just like the money shifts, or the power shifts with them and continues through that bloodline.
So you got to think about it, though, is what if is what, here's the thing, is you had the World Fairs. We've all seen the videos. I played them I play them nightly on our restream. It's in our, we got about 110 documentaries and videos that we play on our nightly streams, and the World Fairs one is in there. And there's some serious concerns that you have about this, and you got to wonder, is this the remnants of, so what if the last cataclysm was right around 1700, right?
Yeah.
Or what if the last cataclysm is, let's go back to, what is the missing piece of time, the 500 years?
Well, I mean, you figure they say that the Spanish started coming over in the 1500s.
Mm-hmm. So, hold on, though. is you know about the missing time. So they say that it's actually the year 1122, right?
Yes.
You've heard this, where there's actually 1,000 years of time added on.
The whole J and I thing, yeah.
Right. So what if potentially the last cataclysm was only 1,100 years ago? That this book was right in that Jesus represented the actual last cataclysm. Okay? And so we're 1,100 years out of that last cataclysm. That would explain our whole history, the missing time up till then, how a civilization could actually survive and thrive out of that, the Tartarian civilization. Right?
Right.
Why these secret societies that represented the eagle would go throughout the entirety of the world and destroy shamanic lineage, destroy all the tribal, right? So you know the whole history of the eagle and the snake, right? Do you understand the symbology of the eagle and the snake?
To a pretty good extent.
So we have St. Paddy's Day coming up, right?
Correct.
Yeah, St. Patrick is the one who went to Ireland and killed all the snakes. Did you know there's no snakes native to Ireland? Never was?
I was about to say, so the legend says, but there's no snakes in Ireland.
So do you know what St. Paddy actually did there? He killed all the druids.
Yeah.
He killed all the druids. He killed all what they would declare the serpent tribe. And so there's this split, this bifurcation of tribes that come out of this time frame. You have the tribe of the eagle. Look at the Holy Roman Empire. You have the double eagle. Look at the American Empire. You have the eagle, the British Empire, the eagle, the Ottoman Empire, the eagle. And then you have the serpent. Look at the Far Eastern, the Indian. Look at all the shamanic tribes. They're all representative of a serpent. Even in the Bible, you have the story of the serpent, right? The serpent is bad. Well, when St. Patrick is actually talking about here is he went to Ireland, Scotland, this whole northern territory, and he killed all the pagans and the druids and the magicians and everybody who practiced any ancient art that was now forbidden by the Catholic Church. Okay? Yep. Now, think about this in the context of what we're talking about here. What if this was just preserved knowledge from before the last flood?
I mean,
historical lineage.
I say quite often, actually, that the elite know the powers of the occult and practice it, and we just don't understand.
What if the powers of the occult were simply technology that we figured out in the last cycle?
There's nothing new underneath the sun. They've just kept it for themselves and just been releasing it as they felt like it.
What if the stories of Noah were simply stories of the last flood cycle before this last one of Jesus?
And that's just their way of trying to purvey it to us, and they just twisted the story and made it about people.
So what if we're only 1,000 years out from this last cataclysm? Okay, they've decimated all the storytellers, all the indigenous and tribal and shamanic leaders on this planet who held this sacred story, who knew the story, knew the true story. Okay, that's what we did to the Spanish. We gave them smallpox, committed genocide against them.
Between the Crusades and wars, killed every man to be able to pass that story down to their son.
That's right. And let's say that they had this high technology. So now we talk about the bubonic plague, right? Now we start looking at the catacombs under France, under Paris, and they start making a lot more sense why there's more people there than could have actually been. Do you know the number of games of this?
I don't. I do know about this. I don't know the numbers right off my head per hand, but I know that it doesn't add up no matter how much you try to add it up.
So there's about approximately 30 square miles of catacombs underneath Paris, said to be dug out by Jesuits. Apparently, during the Black Plague, there is so many bodies that these priests, 10 priests, had to start burning the bodies instead of burying them because the grounds were overflowing. So what they did is they burned the bodies, and then they took the bones and they began to organize the bones, the femurs over here, the skulls over here, the finger bones over here, into art into the catacombs. Apparently, all 30 square miles of the catacombs are filled with these artistic bones of the millions upon millions of people that died during the bubonic plague. Now, here's the problem. Only 3 square miles of the catacombs have been excavated. Now, I want you to think about this, think of millions of human beings. How many bones? There's 128 different bones in the human body or something like that, right?
Well,
Okay, so a million humans, that's 128 million bones. And there's 10 priests working to organize these in an artistic fashion. How long is that going to take you? A lifetime.
yeah, lifetime.
A lifetime. But they were able to fill up 3 square miles, so over 30 square miles of this, okay? Not only that, is the 3 square miles that are excavated, are you ready for this? There's estimated to be 6 million people in that 3 square miles. So if there's 3 square miles excavated, 6 million people, and there's 30 square miles total, that's 60 million to 100 million people. So do you know the population of Paris during this time?
There's no way.
300,000. The population of Paris during this time was 300,000. The population of Europe was 3 million. Apparently, there's 60 million people buried in the French catacombs.
Yeah, there's only 3 million people living, but there's 60 million people buried there. That makes perfect sense.
Unless someone is keeping a very, very dark secret.
Correct.
And I mean, this was only what? If we're looking at this, would have been 500 years. Literally, if we get rid of that 1,000 years, this was 500 years after the cataclysm.
All right.
Right?
Yeah.
So 500 years after the cataclysm, that's enough time to build up an empire, to build up weaponry, to build technology back up, and then invade a Tartarian nation and destroy their people. Take their secrets.
And destroy everything you could so that nobody else could find them.
Yeah. And maybe even cause the plague yourself with a bioweapon.
Yeah.
Think about Corona.
Sure. Sure, yeah. I mean, they all the nervousness going on with bio labs in other countries right now that they're worried about, like that's serious stuff. I mean, here in Atlanta at the CDC, there's no telling what they've got inside that place.
Yeah. So what if all of history was a lie and this was the real thing, is that every few thousand years the earth undergoes a series of cataclysms and the objective is for us to rise up out of our own poverty of ignorance and learn how to preserve knowledge for after this, where we can build up fast enough to get off planet.
Before it happens.
Yeah. Rob, I asked the same thing. Where was the food source for these deceased people? I don't know.
Right.
I'm just going off to the numbers that you can find through standardized research of the French catacombs.
Yeah. Us.
Even if there was just 3 million people or 6 million people.
But then you've got that. Like think about all the different statistics of everything where they've been killing people. You mentioned it earlier, like Mao and Stalin and all them, and even Hitler, and like where are all these people that they're coming up with that are dying when like there's not that many people. There's no way there's that many people on Earth.
Yeah.
Like that because there's no way. Like even like you said, 1 billion people, and now we're at 8 billion. Now that doesn't add up.
It doesn't.
None of it adds up, which can bring you back around to other numbers that they were saying of people dying. So how many of those numbers were actually true?
There you go. And so now you have to start questioning the official narrative that potentially what we're seeing here, everybody, is this declassified document was classified for a reason, because it brings about the questions that derive answers that people don't want out there. And that is the earth lives on a cyclic cycle, is that there's been civilization after civilization on this planet that have thrived and became more and highly technologically advanced than you could ever imagine. And what they did that by preserving the knowledge of the prior civilizations prior to cataclysm. And they worked together to rebuild up society until this last cycle, this group, this parasite, whatever you want to call them, rose up and made sure that they held the information, that they preserved the information, that they preserved the power, and they kept everybody else into a state of ignorance and utilized them as their pawn. And they plan on doing this through the next cycle.
which is why they're, getting so deep into things like AI and all this other stuff, because they're trying their best to
Right.
preserve what they can to keep themselves in control.
But then you look at it from the psychopathic emotional perspective. What if they know what's about to happen? Right? What if they know what's about to happen?
Right.
Okay? Let's just assume that they know that some massive cataclysm is about to happen on this planet, where 85% of the world's population is about to perish.
Okay.
Okay? Do you think that they would do a euthanasia?
You mean like wipe out as many of them as they could at once?
Prior to it. And do it slow, so that they would live good lives and would be able to say goodbye to their families, right? I mean, these people are sociopathic, so they're non-emotional.
Yeah.
So what if they know this is coming? Let's say 2030. Good year, Agenda 2030, Agenda 2050. Let's say that it's coming 2030. And so they realize this, and they actually have compassion. I don't think they do, but let's just say they had compassion, and they've organized a process where people will slowly die, the world population will slowly die off over the next 10 years. And that when this massive cataclysm happens, everybody who's left, there's an ark that they'll get in and be saved.
I've heard somebody talk about that before too. That they're intentionally as dumb as they seem to be, and it's because
they're actually doing this on purpose.
They're doing it on purpose so that people that do catch on are going to make it through it just fine. So we may seem crazy, but there's a reason why we seem crazy.
That's right.
They knew they could reach us and find us, and we would see past the smoke and mirrors.
That's right. And so potentially is when you start looking at the thing, the Fauci ouchie, right? The Fauci ouchie that people got. What if this was just a mechanism for that? And that what if they put this out there, right? The seed banks. So you know about the 25 super cities for Agenda 2030? They want non-emission super cities where nature's off limits.
Yep.
What if those sites were picked strategically because they knew that those are the ones that wouldn't be underwater?
Because out of whatever kind of studying, they knew those sites right there would be safe no matter what.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you do have places that I've seen some stuff where they said that the Tower of Babel was in Chicago.
Yeah.
Like, I know it's crazy, you know what I'm saying? But like, and here Chicago is again another city that's been a city forever, and Timbuktu has made it through who knows how many different historical events.
Well, and then also taking the context that if there was a massive flood and 85% of the world's population survived because we have high technology, we wouldn't have the resources to feed them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they would starve and die a miserable life. So it all comes back to, what if these global elites know exactly what's going to happen? They can't tell you because then there's going to be panic and fear.
And mass chaos.
So what they did is they allowed people to choose their path. Get the Fauci ouchie, right? You lay in ignorance and you'll be gone within 10 years, right? And then when the cataclysm does happen, whoever's left has the ability to be, jump upon the ark or be living in one of these city-states that doesn't tumble down, although it's probably going to be a totalitarian, technocratically controlled AI state. Oh, who knows? I'm not saying these are good people, guys. I'm just kind of throwing ideas out there.
No. I mean, and with that, you'll always have those people that because I think humanity has this capability that are going to be on the outside and have an area that they've luckily survived out of. And, that side of humanity is going to still keep going too.
Yeah. And there's going to be different branches, shaman tribes, nomadic tribes that survive.
Absolutely.
Yup. Wow.
Just like there was different, shaman tribes worldwide. Like, that's not just something that's, exclusive to Native Americans in America. Like, you can go back through any history and they all started as tribes and, families, like just small groups that moved around humans, period. Just moved with seasons and food and everything like that.
So Billy Mandalay says, nah, they're just narcissistic psychopaths. I agree.
I mean, yeah, no,
But we're like,
absolutely.
but what if, it's like the Grinch who grew a heart. Bing, bing, bing.
Right.
Let's save them by killing them.
Right, right. But I mean, if you were going to progress forward with humanity afterward and still want something around, wouldn't you only want the ones smart enough to figure it out?
That's right.
Not the ones, that are going to be, not the ones that are going to lead you to idiocracy.
Right. I made my daughter watch that the other day. She loves it.
It's crazy when fiction becomes reality.
It is, and we're almost there too. Fuddruckers.
There was something he said the other day, and I was like, was that not a quote from that movie?
Joe Biden.
Yeah. I think they
Come on, man.
Sometimes they give him all of his medicine. Sometimes they give him half of it and just push him out on stage.
Yeah.
Let's see what he does next.
Oh God. All right. Well, this was an interesting conversation. I'm gonna read some of these books. I think this is going to be very interesting to get into some of these books. The Secret Cities of South America, The Lost Cities of Africa, The Lost Continent of Mu by James Churchward. James Churchward is one of the first and early Egyptologists. This guy is very, very knowledgeable on these topics. Mid-19th century author. He was an occultist as well as a paleoarchaeologist who traveled the world. I know him because he was one of the first people to start writing about the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. Now, contrary to what you might have heard by Billy Carson or any of these other people out there, and nothing against Billy Carson, the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the actual book that you see out there, was actually a book written by the Theosophist Society through mediumship, of which they said they channeled Thoth and then wrote the book. That's not the Emerald Tablets. The Emerald Tablets were said to be at the final resting spot of Thoth, or Hermes Trismegistus, who was this man who had risen the divinity by lifting the veil of Isis and learning the secrets and mysteries of the universe. Basically, he obtained enlightenment in another sense. When his tomb was uncovered in, I believe, 1797, they found his tomb, the god Thoth. They opened it up. There was one emerald tablet. And the emerald tablet read only one phrase, and that was, as above, so below, as above. That is the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, and that is all there is to the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. And that is probably one of the most important things that you can learn these days. It's called the law of correspondence, which means that the upper realms of reality, the upper laws of nature, the upper laws of the universe, of God, completely dominate the lower laws, of which the lower laws are based upon the same principles and functional laws as the higher laws, and they operate in a symbiotic sharing relationship, that the laws are no different in the upper echelons than they are in the lower echelons. Which means that if there's cycles here, cataclysmic cycles and so forth, we can look at our own life as a model for what's actually happening here in Earth, or what's happening here in our solar system. And let me ask you this. What is the one cycle within your life? There's one specific number, and this is scientifically and researchly proven. There's one number in your life of which you go through growth spurts and kind of like these death spurts where a cataclysm happens every blank years.
Oh, it's 20 something. Oh. No.
7. Every 7 years, your whole mind and body and personality and everything unfolds and switches and changes. And it goes through a growth and a death process, mimicking the cyclic nature and actions of the planet, of the solar system, of the galaxy, of the universe. Because as above, so below. Which means that I believe a lot of what was said tonight in the sense of how all this has come about, the history. I think we've been lied to for a very, very long time, and our history is not necessarily what we think it is, and that a lot of this truth potentially could be coming out. JimBob, where can we find you, bud?
Actually, I have just launched my website. It is unconstitutionalawakening.com. You can find me there. We got me and some admins from some of my meme pages, which you can also find me on Facebook, Unconstitutional Awakening and Captain Conspiracy and the Freedom Pirates. You can also find me on TikTok at JimBob OvalShorts.
Captain Conspiracy! Do you do it like Captain Caveman? They do Captain Conspiracy?
I have not. It was just somebody took a shot and thought that it hurt my feelings, and I thought, nah, I'm gonna run with it. I love it.
You should do like a Captain Caveman, Captain Conspiracy. That would be pretty cool.
Maybe that's how I can open up a podcast that I'm working on for our show. So
that'd be cool.
For our site. So
awesome, cool. Well, JimBob, thank you for being my co-host tonight. Much appreciated. Everybody, guys, we're going to be heading over the Fringe after dark. We're going to be heading over the Fringe After Dark, a subscription show. If you want to join in on that, just for $5.99 a month, a cup of coffee at Starbucks, you can join in on that in 30 minutes from now at 9:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That is hosted on Zoom for the Master Patrons and above, and then for everybody else, that's going to be on YouTube. If you want a Zoom link or if you want to jump into the YouTube and you just want to try it out for tonight, just post on the platform, the social Repill that you want to, or send me a message directly, or Andrea Kraft or Vince Tagliavia, and we'll get you guys in there so you guys can check it out before you go ahead and do the subscription. We have a lot of fun. We continue the conversation, but we also do topics and we talk about a lot of different things. JimBob is more than welcome to join. He knows all about the deal. He's joined us many, many times before. I don't know if he's got on tonight, but if he joins, that'd be pretty cool. Other than that, you guys have a great night. Don't forget, tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on 10:40 a.m. on WYSL in Western New York. Dark the Light Show Episode 2 is airing, my radio show. That is replayed at 9 p.m. on Sunday. And then tomorrow night, 6:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you have Makes You Think with, I believe, Roxy, Vince, and JimBob. And
down there tomorrow night.
This is actually going to be a good show.
Oh yeah. He's got me excited about this one because we're doing things about movies and predictive programming and books and everything. It's just a whole bunch of stuff at once. It's going to be a good show.
Awesome. You guys have a good night, and we'll see some of you guys here in a little while. Others, we'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Good night. God bless.
Bye everybody.